I don't think there's ever been a better time to be a PC gamer on a tiny budget. You only have to look at channels like Random Gaming in HD to realise you can squeeze surprising performance out of even the smallest amount of cash. CSGO, meanwhile, might not be the toughest of games to run, but it's evolved a fair bit in the half-decade since its release, which begs a question. How do its listed minimum requirements hold up? Well, last year, Skazzy 3 tested just that, with a triple-core AMD Phenom and a couple of different Radeon cards. He found it performed pretty poorly in-game, although the video is now unlisted, sadly. I, on the other hand, have chosen to go the route of the Core 2 Duo E6600, mainly because that's what I had lying around, though they're not exactly expensive by any means. The Windows requirements list 2GB of RAM, which is pretty small, and unfortunately no video card is specified, instead just leaving some vague capabilities. Luckily, on the Linux page they're a little more helpful, even if they do list two completely different tiers of GPU from either manufacturer. I decided to go with the GeForce 9600 GT, which probably isn't helping my reputation over on AMD, but it was a pretty good buy since CEX seems to massively underprice them versus the eBay second-hand market. Ha! Anyway, a couple days later my purchase arrived and it was time to assemble the system. Can't help but wonder who thought it was a good idea to make the card look like it's on fire, but I digress. I installed Windows 7 from the DVD since this PC didn't seem to like my Windows 10 USB, then got to business. First impressions weren't great. The graphics card ran its fan at vacuum cleaner levels until the drivers were fully installed, and Windows 7 was awfully unresponsive with the pitiful amount of RAM. The real test though would of course be Counter-Strike itself. My method was to try 3 different popular maps and run 3 1-minute benchmark passes with Fraps, hosting the game on my main computer to simulate being in a match. Then I'd average the results on each map to draw conclusions. All the graphics settings were on lowest, with resolutions at 1024x768, but I refused to do any further optimizations or command line options as I believe the game should work on its requirements out of the box. So how was it then? Loading times were painfully long, and there was a coin flip chance that you'd be booted out to main menu with an obscure error message, but once you made it in-game it was borderline playable. Dust 2 averaged almost exactly 60 frames per second, whereas Overpass was a little below that, and the new Inferno also managed an impressive 60. That's not the whole story though. Despite the respectable average frame rates, the game was often stuttery and inconsistent, slowing down a lot when action happened, meaning that minimum frame rates were often in the single figures. It was clear that the graphics card was barely stretching its legs, and the awful stuttering was probably as a result of our system's RAM starvation. I decided then to give Valve the benefit of the doubt and try again with 4GB of memory instead, since that's apparently the minimum for Linux users. This meant jumping ship to a different motherboard, since our old Intel one only supported 2GB. This board had a few more luxuries, including the decency to work with Windows 10, so I went with that this time. Windows was much more pleasant to use this time round, and the game had a massive performance bump as well. Now suddenly our Dust 2 average was 90 FPS, with minimum frame rates at a buttery smooth 65. Overpass didn't fare quite as well, with averages around 70 FPS and minimums more in the 30 range, but it was still a far cry from the stuttery mess from before. Inferno was pretty similar really, with the average just at 60 FPS, but minimums again at a much nicer 35. You can imagine my surprise at how well the game runs all of a sudden, on the exact same processor and graphics card no less. For the sake of science, I tested again with 2GB of RAM, but on the new motherboard and Windows install. Predictably, the minimum frame rates were behind on the 4GB system, yet still better than the Windows 7 setup. So I guess the newer operating system is actually much more efficient at memory management, though 4GB still gives the best overall experience. So yeah, I was pretty impressed with these so-called minimum requirements by the end. The CPU is clearly the bottleneck, so if you were thinking of actually building a system like this, then I'd recommend a Core 2 Quad, or perhaps a touch of overclocking, but it's far from inadequate. The graphics card proved more than enough and was barely topping 30% utilisation even on Inferno. For £10 plus shipping, I'd definitely call it a steal. Video memory never exceeded half usage either, so I'm willing to support Valve's 256MB requirement in that regard. The game's install folder, meanwhile, ended up being 14.6GB, just below the advertised 15GB. So I'll give that a stamp of approval too. Were I Valve, I would consider adding an actual card model to the Windows requirements, and upping the RAM to 3GB, and also making Half-Life 3. Wait, am I even allowed to make those jokes anymore? Oh well, either way I'm going to declare the minimum requirements playable and call it a day. Thanks everyone for sticking with me through this epic journey, and also thanks because apparently I have 2,000 subscribers now. I should probably upload more often. Nah, just kidding, I'm out of ideas. Bye!